Hey, what's up my brothers and sisters? This is Enemy Stand User, and with the release of the TCB scans for Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 227, I wanted to talk a little bit about Gojo's strategy in this battle, and Gojo is really stubborn in an interesting way though. You see, in this chapter we have the most technical and high-level fights in Jujutsu Kaisen. Just for example, in the span of 5 chapters, we've seen extension techniques, high-level jujutsu, high-level reinforcement, high-level cursed energy manipulation, binding vows, reverse curse technique reversal, domain expansions, domain amplification, symbol domain, falling blossom emotion, and all the while Gojo and Sukuna are just breaking the standard. No one in the manga are doing anything that they can. They absolutely abuse the power system, and their use of jujutsu is simply genius. This chapter we see the span of 3 domain expansion battles have commenced almost back to back, and the peanut gallery including Yuta, Kusakabe and company cannot believe just the godlike jujutsu that they're witnessing. Everyone is shocked. Gojo is an absolute mad lad this chapter. In his very first panel after last chapter 226, Gojo is standing outside of Sukuna's effective range for the domain, and we see there is a distinctive perimeter of Malevolent Shrine, and Sukuna can adjust it as we will see. But Gojo has every right to teleport out and escape Malevolent Shrine. It's actually said that it's rather easy for Gojo to do, but no, Gojo still wants to smoke and he wants to engage in a domain battle. And when Sukuna further expanded his own domain to reach Gojo, Gojo then again uses his own domain Unlimited Void. Now at this point, based on the last chapter, everyone is confused on why Gojo does this again. But this time, Gojo switched the conditions of his barrier, so instead of being strong from the inside and weak from the outside, the shell is instead weak inside and strong outside, making it harder to break. In this second instance, since Sukuna and Gojo cancel out their sure hits, they fight hand to hand, and when they do this, Sukuna reveals yet another crazy feat for how he can use domain amplification inside their own domain expansions. This is possible because domain amplification only doesn't allow the user to use their own innate technique within their body, but once it's imbued into an actual barrier, a domain, it is an actual different case. Sukuna is hit by Gojo's physical attacks, but that actually works out because see, in the circumstance that we're in now, Sukuna cannot break Gojo's barrier from the outside since Gojo is now protecting it, right? But what about the inside? See, he can't break it inside either because of the sure hit canceling out. Gojo knew this, and that's why Gojo did not give a shit. Even if Sukuna used amplification, he's like, so what, I'm just gonna hit you now. See, what Gojo did not count on was that Sukuna shut off his sure hit curse technique, and when Sukuna or anyone else is in physical contact with Gojo, the opponent is not affected by Unlimited Void, as Kenjaku so nicely explained by his random interjection. In order to destroy Gojo Satoru's domain from the outside, Sukuna expanded his effective range and increased the power of his binding vow even further than he did in Shibuya. So once again, Sukuna uses a binding vow in his domain, and then Sukuna had another binding vow to further increase the power of his domain outside by removing the sure hit effect inside. Meanwhile, Sukuna survived the inside of Gojo's domain expansion because he kept touching Gojo directly. Infinity is definitely still a thing, so I think Sukuna increased his amplification output like Gojo implies, and he would just be able to keep in contact with him. Or really, that could just be Gojo's mistake for using physical strikes instead and not just increasing his limitless output. I don't know why he didn't do that. Whatever the case, Gojo's domain expansion Unlimited Void has fallen once again and it has broken. Now, I've seen quite a lot of talk that Sukuna's domain is more refined than Gojo's domain, but that isn't quite the case here because Sukuna only wins due to the compatibility issue, not refinement. The short hits will always cancel each other out, not overpower. Because of the conditions of their domains, Sukuna has managed to beat Gojo's domain twice. See, with the way domains work, they are supposed to trap targets inside, and when another domain of equal caliber forms, the barriers form a pair and they overlap to cancel each other out. It's obvious enough that Sukuna not having a closed barrier lets him take advantage of the outside density of Gojo's domain and break it from the outside. Gojo specifically wants to keep engaging Sukuna in this domain expansion battle, even though his domain is incompatible. So he's trying to overcome this bad matchup. That's why he switched the domain conditions, but Sukuna caught on to this and he switched his own conditions and directly touched Gojo to avoid his sure hit attack. Gojo must want to win a domain battle because he knows Unlimited Void is a superior curse technique regarding domains. Even in this chapter, Infinite Void has a complex curse technique effect and Malevolent Shrine has a more simple effect. That's why Gojo can keep surviving in Sukuna's domain and use secret arts or esoteric techniques like Falling Blossom Emotion or even New Shadow style simple domain to buy time and replenish himself. Gojo keeps testing and testing, and Sukuna keeps up the pressure. In their latest domain clash, Gojo expands his domain a third time, and this time what he does is to expand his domain large enough to capture or cover over Sukuna's effective range, which has over a 200-meter radius. Mei points out, expanding a domain's range will decrease the quality of the domain itself. So since it covers Sukuna's perimeter, the sure hit will no longer break it from the outside. However, the tug of war inside might suffer since Gojo has decreased the quality of his domain. There is a slight crack and the cast gets a bit of a jump scare. However, they notice that the domain did not break, and little by little the domain is starting to shrink and it becomes so tiny. It looks about the size of a basketball. The end note reads, "The battle between the strongest becomes more dense." So we see that the shrine is retained inside Gojo's domain, and Gojo managed to condense his shell into a compact format. What this probably means is that the domain's exterior will be even harder to break. Inside a domain is a different size than the outside in the real world, so Gojo is doing something very unique. If you think about it, if the condensed domain was extremely hard to break, and Gojo can make it strong on the outside, then their sure hit attacks will cancel out on the inside like it did before. And if Gojo is smart about it, he'd know that Sukuna cannot break his domain without that binding vow that relinquishes Sukuna's sure hit on the inside. Because if he tried to do that again, then Sukuna would have to touch Gojo to avoid his infinite void, and that would leave only Gojo's dominant sure hit on the inside. That's why Sukuna's binding vow was such a gamble. He has to touch Gojo. Amplification should also be able to neutralize the sure hit effects of a domain expansion, at least as far as this translation of the fan book says. So I don't know why Sukuna had to touch Gojo in the first place. Maybe amplification wasn't great enough for Unlimited Void, yet at the same time it was enough to touch Gojo. So I won't lie, it is quite weird. So in this third round, if Gojo plays keep away by strengthening his own limitless over amplification, because that is a thing that Gojo does and apparently he forgot he can do that, then Sukuna cannot touch him and he would be forced to come up with a new strategy or continue to use his sure hit to protect himself while they can fight hand to hand like they did before. Again, Gojo probably wants to hit Sukuna with his sure kill Unlimited Void, and that's why he keeps trying to win a domain expansion battle, of course. But once he actually hits Sukuna with his Infinite Void, a more complex and superior curse technique effect should give Gojo an advantage. The only reason Sukuna would survive Unlimited Void would simply be because he is Sukuna. I'm not talking about if Sukuna counters with amplification or simple domain or anything else. No, how would Sukuna survive Unlimited Void raw? Because next time I do believe that Sukuna might be hit by Infinite Void and he will have to find a way to survive it. On the flip side, because of Sukuna's binding vow, if he does choose the conditions of his domain, then Sukuna could limit his effective range even further and strengthen his own curse technique, so maybe Sukuna could win an actual tug of war depending on the circumstances. But Gojo just threw in a real curveball by condensing his own domain expansion and confining Sukuna within it. A more dense domain might actually give both fighters a buff, but if Gojo has in a sense captured or swallowed Malevolent Shrine, then it would limit its effective range only inside, and it would give Gojo an advantage because Sukuna could no longer break it from the outside. But I'm sure both Gojo and Sukuna got something for us next week. But that's only what I think, and please share your awesome thoughts below, and I'll likely make more videos talking about what's next with other topics in this chapter like Yuta, Kishimo, or Kenjaku. But this was a very interesting fight, and I cannot wait to see how this turns out and how Gege explains what is happening and possibly gives us a lot more from this fight. But this has been Enemy Stand User, and I'll see you awesome guys in the next one. Bye-bye.